Greetings, fellow cinephiles. Typically, my movie tastes tend to harmonize with the website we're going to talk about today, Rotten Tomatoes. If you're not aware, Rotten Tomatoes is a movie review website in which it gives a score out of 100, a percentage, on how many reviewers give it a thumbs up score, critics, that is. It does have an audience score as well. Typically, I would say Rotten Tomatoes gets most films right. Of course, all of this is subjective. There were 15 films I found recently where I was surprised at either how high or how low those scores were. Curious to see what other people think as well. So I made this little slideshow here. It's nothing exceptional, very basic, but I figured it was a good way for me to show these movies off and their scores and such. So starting off, we have a film that I hold near and dear to my heart, and it's the film that kind of kick-started. No, wait. It's not the film that kick-started this. We'll get to that film in a bit. But for this film, it is Home Alone. When I looked at the score for this film on Rotten Tomatoes, I was shocked. I was under the assumption that this film was well beloved, at least by audiences. Maybe I never really looked at the critic score for this film. One of my favorites, definitely my favorite Christmas movie, and I hold it in high esteem, but it only has a 66% on Rotten Tomatoes, which is crazy to me. Maybe it's too slapsticky. Yeah, I feel like that might be a good indication of its score is the slapstick nature of the film. Alternatively, it does have an 81 audience score, so I'm not too out of the loop here. Uh, before, like if you had asked what I would have guessed Home Alone would have gotten, I probably would have guessed like a 77, probably like 10 points higher than it currently sits. And then the audience score, I probably would have guessed like an 85. But in my brain, it's like an 80, you know? Like it's not the the greatest movie of all time, and I wouldn't expect it to, be on IMDb Top 100, but I still think it's a solid film. However, it is its sequel that got me the idea to make this film because when I saw the score for Home Alone 2 Lost in New York, I knew I had to talk about it somehow. Um, Home Alone 2 I don't like as much as Home Alone 1, but I still enjoy it, you know? And I definitely know people, I feel like it's a sentiment out there as well, that some people have that Home Alone 2 is better than Home Alone 1. And I'm not gonna like I would argue against it, but I wouldn't like this is not a hill I'm willing to die on, you know? Oh, apparently, the critics agree with me that Home Alone 1 is a better film because Home Alone 2 has a 35% on Rotten Tomatoes. That is lower than a lot of bad films, and I don't know why. Like the first film, the slapstick nature, okay, what is this film doing that it makes it so bad? It's basically the first film. Maybe that's what it's like rehashing the first film, I guess. But I'm confused on this one really. Home Alone 1, 66%. Okay, at least it's in the positive, you know. Home Alone 2. See, I would have suspected Home Alone 2 to get a 66%, if I'm being honest. And then wide gap between the Rotten Tomato and audience score. Audience score having a 62%. That might be the highest deficit on this list. No, well, maybe. We'll see. But yeah, Home Alone 2, not a 35. Next up, we have a movie that features all over lists like these. Uh, a film that people believe Rotten Tomato got wrong. It is Hook. Yeah, I remember when I first got into looking at Rotten Tomato scores, I guess. Uh, Hook's score was definitely a shock to me. I'm not, I'm not like in love with Hook. I just think it's a solid film. I definitely think it's better than a 37%. Um, I can see why critics might not love it, but as like that many critics gave it a thumbs down, like not the best film ever, but still not a 37. Uh, the audience tends to agree with a 76. This might be the largest deficit in terms of the Rotten Tomato and audience score. Yeah, the I think the classic example of Rotten Tomatoes just missing the ball on that one. Next up is another personal one to me. This is Pirates of the Caribbean Dead Man's Chest. Now, Dead Man's Chest, out of the original three Pirates movies, is my least favorite, but I still very much enjoy it. I think it is a solid film. I think it is a good film. And I think it is much better than a 53%. This is, I think it's barely fresh. I think 50% is the cutoff for fresh. Uh, Wild to me. Like, I believe Pirates 1 has a 79, if I'm remembering correctly, which you can bump that up a bit higher, I think, but that's personal. I honestly think this film is scored too low, and I can't like I can see why it's less than Pirates 1, but not a 53. And the audience gives it a 72, which is probably where I would put it. Maybe a bit higher just for personal, just on a personal level. I think it's a bit higher than a 72, but I feel like if I saw Rotten Tomato give it a 72, I'd be more inclined to agree or at least see where they're coming from. Of course, after seeing this film, I had to look up the next film in the series, the next film in the slide, Pirates of the Caribbean at World's End, which has a 43% on Rotten Tomatoes. Now, while I do like At World's End more than Dead Man's Chest, I can see why critics would rate Dead Man's Chest higher. But when I saw Dead Man's Chest have such a low score, I knew Pirates 3 was gonna get the sharp end of the sword, so to speak. See, this is one I would think people or think critics would put in the high 60s, you know? Not a fine film, you know? But here I think it is in the rotten category. Like this is a bad film? Mm, I don't think so. And funnily enough, the audience also gave this one a 72, the same score of Dead Man's Chest. So, my taste more in line with the audience, if not a bit higher than what the audience would give these movies. But yeah, a 43, I don't think that's even remotely close on that one. These next few films are on the other end of the spectrum, in which I think Rotten Tomatoes gave them too high a score. And up next is Star Wars Episode 2 Attack of the Clones. And in my personal opinion, the worst Star Wars film. You could make the case for Rise of Skywalker, and I wouldn't fight you too hard on it. But this film, I don't want to bash the prequels, you know, because people do like the prequels. I'm not one of those people. I mean, there are aspects of the prequels I can enjoy, and it's great for the memes, I suppose, but not a fan of the prequel trilogy. And this is the worst offender, Attack of the Clones. Uh, Now, it did get a 62%, which is not great by any means, but it is somehow higher than Phantom Menace. I guess Phantom Menace has Jar Jar Binks. Like, okay, but the poor the romance in this movie. There's no chemistry. I don't want to blame the actors. I feel like the script is just bad. It's just a bad script. I mean, at least I feel like the other two films have something going for them. You know, I feel like uh, I do feel Revenge of the Sith is the best of the prequels and is verging on good. It is okay. Uh, at least Phantom Menace. It's got the pod racing and the Darth Maul fight. Attack of the Clones. I'm not with it. Audience gave it a 56, which I feel is still too high. I just think it's the worst of the Star Wars. Maybe Rise of Skywalker. Like, it's like like Rise of Skywalker is just a mess, and this is just boring. I think, in terms of entertainment, I'd rather watch a mess, if that makes sense. But yeah, Star Wars Episode 2. Next up is a remake, or is it more of a different adaptation? That's I never really thought of it. I always thought it was like I thought it was a remake of the old film, but it could just be a completely new adaptation, which fair enough, but it is Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, a movie I feel does not hold up to the original Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, but apparently critics very much liked it because it has a 83% on Rotten Tomatoes. I think that's a bit too high. Like I don't hate Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, but an 83 I feel is pushing it. I don't know, it feels emotionless and cold, I want to say. It has some charm to it. Uh, but again, I feel like 83 is too high. Audience gave it a 51. I think that might be a bit too low, a bit too harsh on the film. I'd probably go low 60s, mid 60s if I was being generous. But yeah, not a great film. It definitely does not hold a candle to the original, in my opinion. But I am probably dunking on some films people like. So this next film is actually a film I quite enjoy, but I do think it is a bit too high. Toy Story 4. Original three Toy Stories, excellent films, and deserving of the ratings they have on Rotten Tomatoes. Toy Story 4, however, I do not think it is a 96. I feel like Toy Story 4, while I think it is a solid film, maybe even a good film, uh, it is not on the same level as the other three Toy Stories. I think it has a higher rating than Monsters Inc. and Ratatouille and Wally. Yeah, that's like no. There's a there's a steep gap between those films and this film. Toy Story 4 is indeed a step down from the original Toy Stories. I was thinking like high 70s for this film, like mid 70s. Well, low 80s, you know? It's still good. And it still has Toy Story charm to it. I just feel like there's so much missing. It is a. I do feel like all the side characters get very much sidelined. I feel like at least some of the complaints would have been mitigated if they just called this movie Woody, you know? Like, it is Woody, like, it is his film. I mean, you could argue the other films Woody, but it's more like a Woody and Buzz thing. Toy Story 3 kind of veers more toward Woody, but this is definitely Woody the film. You know, Buzz got Lightyear, Woody could have got this. It would have been fine, you know? But audience actually agreeing with the critics with the 94. I mean, I feel like it's no one's gonna go see Toy Story 4 and say it was a bad film, you know? Maybe some people do. I feel like people would say, yeah, that was alright. And any negative connotations they'd have with this movie is, oh, they shouldn't have made it after Toy Story 3, or compared to the first three, this is not up to par. Alright. So I pointed out how a film I like has a too high score on Rotten Tomatoes. So let's get to a film I don't like that has a way too high score on Rotten Tomato. That is,
Ralph breaks the internet. What is it doing with an 88%?
okay, so people like this film. Okay, that's fine. Why does it have a higher rating than the original? It this film retracts on character development from the first film. It has cheap, dated internet jokes, and it's just chock full of flagrant advertisement. Well, the audience is 64, which I think is more fair. I don't think this is a trash film, I guess, but it's getting there, you know? I wouldn't put it in the same line as Chicken Little, but it's inching toward there. I don't think it's an 88. I will strongly say it is not an 88% film. Well, I think this is yeah, I think this is the Disney film I think is the most overrated on Rotten Tomatoes. So next we have the film I feel is the most underrated from Disney Animation Studios, Brother Bear. Now, not the greatest film, I will admit. Me and my family who are around my age, we have a strong ties with this film. I can admit it has its flaws, but I don't think it's as bad as a 38%. Um, Low 60s maybe even high 50s if you want to be a bit harsh. 38, I don't think this film deserves that. I feel like there are strong elements to this film that bring it well above a 38. Like I understand the complaints of, playing music over the emotional beats. Yeah, okay. Um, I guess maybe the humor is isn't for everyone. I mean, the humor is not technically for me either, but there are some funny bits that my family and I quote to this day. Audience score given it a 66, which is higher than Ralph Breaks the Internet. So good on you, audience. You know what's up. I was also going to include Robin Hood, the Disney film, but there was a lot of animation on this already. I didn't want to bog it down with just Disney stuff. Just as an aside, Robin Hood could have a higher Rotten Tomato score. But speaking of, I thought I was done with the Disney films, but not quite. While not Disney Animation Studios is a Disney film, one that I was shocked to see so low, Lion King 2, Simba's Pride, I felt like widely regarded as one of, if not the best Disney direct to video sequel, but it's like I don't think it's even in the top five in terms of the Rotten Tomato score. I think Lion King 1.5, uh, for sure Lion King 1.5 has a better score, which I feel like Lion King 2 is a better film than Lion King 1.5. I know some people who prefer Lion King 2 to the original. I wouldn't go that far with it, but I think it is better than a 67. Now, looking at this and other films, 67, not terrible, you know? Like, if this was a low 70s film, maybe I wouldn't have even put it on this list. But I feel like it's better than a 67. Am I crazy? Maybe I am crazy because the audience gave it a 61. Maybe this one I'm getting blinded by my nostalgia on it. I will still fight that 67 is too low. But speaking of blinded by nostalgia, maybe this next film, very much I could be blinded by my nostalgia because Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles from 1990, a film I grew up with, a film I have fond memories of. I did a video of my top 50 films. This film was actually in the conversation to getting put on that list. I thought it was well regarded, and so I was a bit surprised when it had a 46%. Um, I could see why it would have a lower score than, 80. I maybe like in between the 60, 70 range. 46, I don't know. It's got that 90s cheese charm. Maybe that's going against the, maybe that's why the score is so low. For the record, 2003 Ninja Turtle cartoon is my favorite version of the Ninja Turtles. That's neither here nor there. 81 on the audience score, so I don't feel as crazy. This goes in line with my next film, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 2 Secret of the Ooze, which has a 37. Now, I do see why this would be lower than the first film, and in comparison to the jump between the first and second film in terms of the scores, I would say that's the amount of difference that I would assume would be in place. But considering how low the first one is, I had to put the second one on the list. Uh, I mean, I do get this, and they don't use their weapons, which as a kid I didn't notice, and then when I found that out, I was like, you can't really unsee it. And then a 68 on the audience, which is probably where I'd place this film. I mean, my nostalgia says it's a bit higher, but on like an objective level, I think a 68 is where it would sit. Huh. I thought we were done with the animated films, but I guess I snuck one more in there. This is from DreamWorks. This is Road to El Dorado. Many people I know love this film. Uh, so I just, in my brain, I thought it was highly regarded, at least maybe on a critic level, than what I was seeing, which was a 49%. I mean, it's definitely better than a 49%. At, on a personal level, not not my favorite film, but it's solid. I'd say it's a good film. Pretty funny, a lot of charm to it, I'd say. And yeah, the audience score of 67 still I felt low. Like I would have thought this film would have been a bit higher. I mean, it's not going to be up there with Shrek and How to Train Your Dragon and Kung Fu Panda in terms of DreamWorks films, but it's still a good film, I'd say. Yeah, 49. I don't think so. So my last film here, kind of a joke, but kind of not. Uh, it's The Room. Now this one, I feel, could be both too high and too low. It is a 24% on Rotten Tomatoes. Uh, I feel like this either needs to be 0 or 100. Negative 100 if Rotten Tomatoes could go into the negatives. I don't think I've ever seen a worse film. I have seen films I like worse than this film, but I don't think I've seen a worse film. I will say, however, there's like this was a few years ago. I watched a compilation of bad movies. It's like a YouTube video, and it just shows very bad scenes. The Room was the best looking of all those films, so you know what? Maybe this 24 is justified. But okay, so 24% of critics gave this a thumbs up, which maybe they were doing it in the sense of people, how people like it now. It's so bad, it's good. It's just a weird concept for a critic to rate a film, to like a film based off how bad it is. I feel like, what if all the critics did that and this film sat at 100 or a 98? They had this, I think if it would have sat at a 50, like the audience score of 47, it also would have made sense because it's like, yeah, this film is terrible, but it's a good time. It's a great time. If you're a fan of bad movies, this is the quintessential pick. This is like the king of bad movies. But yeah, That's been 15 films. I feel Rotten Tomatoes has got it wrong. Let me know down below if you feel there are any films I left off or sound off on your opinions on these films. Maybe I'll do another list like this in the future if I can find some more. Yeah, these were just 15 I found pretty quick, so I'm sure there's a bunch of other ones I could do. But these were ones I found that I was familiar with, because there are other films that have wide berth in audience and critic scores, but I just haven't seen those films. But yeah, maybe I'll do another one of these in the future. But until then, farewell, fellow cinephiles.